Megan here. I'm 33, and 4 years ago I married a man named Julian, a man whose mother decided from day one that my little girl didn't count as real family. Zoe was 6 when Julian and I said our vows. She came from a life I lived before Julian, and I kept hoping his mother, Eleanor, would eventually warm up to her. She never did. At every gathering, every holiday table, I'd watch Eleanor light up around Vanessa's kids, while Zoe barely registered as a person in the room. I told myself it would pass with time. I was wrong. Julian's 40th birthday was meant to be something special. I spent weeks organizing every detail. A reserved room at the restaurant he loved, a cake carved to look like the guitar he'd always wanted, but never let himself buy. Zoe, 7 now, had spent 2 nights hunched over a card covered in glitter glue, obsessing over every letter until it looked perfect to her. She held that card to her chest the whole ride there, chattering about how excited she was to see her dad's face when he opened it. We got there early to help set everything up. Eleanor and Julian's father, Robert, were already seated, along with Vanessa and her 2 kids. The room was gorgeous. Navy linens, string lights overhead, a small table near the window set for the children. I noticed only 2 chairs at that table and figured a third would be added once everyone settled in. I was wrong about that too. When I brought it up with Eleanor, she looked at me as though I'd said something ridiculous. She explained, flat and matter of fact, that the kids' table belonged to Vanessa's children because they were Julian's actual nieces and nephews, and that Zoe would be more comfortable tucked away in the side room by the entrance. She delivered it like she was reading off a seating chart, not telling a 7-year-old she didn't belong at her own stepfather's party. I told her flatly that wasn't going to happen. Zoe would sit with us, or with her cousins, like always. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more and walked off. I thought that was that. It wasn't. 20 minutes later, while I was in the bathroom adjusting Zoe's hair clip, I heard raised voices outside. I came out to find Eleanor gripping Zoe's shoulder, physically pushing her out of the dining room toward the side hallway. Zoe was still clutching her card, eyes wide with confusion, stumbling as Eleanor shoved her along. I caught Eleanor's voice, low and cutting, telling her this room was for family only and that she'd have to wait outside until the real children were done eating. I don't even remember crossing that room. 1 second I was frozen. The next I had Zoe pulled tight against me, feeling her tremble. The whole restaurant had gone silent. Vanessa's kids stopped mid-bite. Robert sat like a statue at the head of the table, saying nothing. Same as always whenever Eleanor overstepped. I asked Eleanor what exactly she thought she was doing, and without a trace of guilt, she told me Zoe wasn't blood, and that gave her every right to decide who belonged at her son's celebration. That's the exact moment Julian walked in from the parking lot, jacket half off, and took in the scene. His mother looming over his sobbing stepdaughter, his wife trembling with rage in the middle of the room. I watched something behind his eyes go still and hard. He looked at Zoe's wet cheeks, at the crumpled card still balled in her fist, at his mother's blank, unrepentant face, and something in him locked into place. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. He walked straight past his mother, crouched in front of Zoe, and carefully smoothed the bent corner of her card. Then he stood, faced the whole room, his parents, his sister, every guest who'd shown up for him, and said something that drained the color from his mother's face and froze his father's fork in midair. He said he only intended to say this once, so he wanted everyone to hear it clearly. Zoe was his daughter, not through blood, but through every choice that actually built a family. The school drop-offs, the scraped knees he'd patched up, the bedtime stories he read in ridiculous voices until she drifted off laughing. He said anyone who thought DNA was the only thing that made a family didn't understand family at all. Then he looked his mother dead in the eye and told her if she couldn't extend Zoe the same warmth she gave Vanessa's kids, she wouldn't be invited to another family event again, birthday or otherwise. The room stayed dead silent. Eleanor tried to speak, but Julian lifted a hand. Not harsh, just final, and said he wasn't finished. He turned to his father next, his voice catching, not from anger, but from something older, something that had clearly been building for years. He asked Robert how many times he'd watched his mother tear into a child and said absolutely nothing. He said silence was its own form of cruelty, and going forward, both of his parents needed to either fully accept Zoe or step out of their lives completely. Robert's face went crimson. For the first time in 4 years, I saw him look like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. He mumbled something about not realizing things had gotten this far. Julian just shook his head slowly, like he'd heard that same excuse one too many times. Vanessa, to her credit, was already on her feet, pulling her kids closer to make room for Zoe at their table without a second's hesitation. Her youngest, Theo, scooted over and patted the seat next to him, asking Zoe if she wanted to see the picture he'd drawn for Uncle Julian. Such a small thing. But I watched Zoe's shoulders finally drop from around her ears, and something in my own chest loosened too. Not everyone in that family had failed her, just the two who should have known better. Eleanor made one last attempt to justify herself, insisting she was only protecting tradition, that family dinners had always been about blood relatives first. Julian cut her off, calm but immovable, and told her tradition was never an excuse for cruelty, and he wouldn't raise Zoe in a family that made her feel like a stranger in her own life. He told her it was time she figured out what mattered more, being right or actually being present for every one of her grandchildren. No exceptions. The rest of dinner was quiet, but changed. Robert pulled a chair near Zoe for a while, asking about her favorite subject in school, awkward but genuine in a way I'd never seen from him. Eleanor mostly picked at her plate, stealing glances at Zoe with an expression somewhere between shame and stubborn pride. She didn't apologize that night. I hadn't expected her to. Some people need more than one uncomfortable dinner to unlearn a lifetime of favoritism, but something had cracked open in that room, and I didn't think it was closing quietly. Before we left, Julian knelt in front of Zoe again and told her that her card was the best gift he'd ever gotten, and that it was going straight to his desk at work so he could see it every day. Her whole face lit up, and she threw her arms around his neck so hard he laughed and nearly fell backward. Watching the two of them, something in me finally settled after 4 years of feeling unsettled. A quiet certainty that whatever Eleanor believed about blood and belonging, Julian had already made his choice, and he'd made it in front of everyone who needed to witness it. On the drive home, Zoe fell asleep in the back seat, still gripping a scrap of wrapping paper. Julian reached over and took my hand without a word. We didn't need to talk about it. It had already been said, out loud, in front of everyone, and permanently. Eleanor might not change overnight, but the shape of our family had shifted for good. My daughter would never again be told to wait outside while someone else's kids got to eat at the table, not while Julian had any say in it. And after that night, I believed him with everything I had. That's the full rewrite. Same characters and plot beats, but entirely reworded sentence by sentence, so it's original text rather than a copy. Want me to follow up with the Dutch translation, thumbnail text, SEO title, or video/image prompts next?